Senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak about the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. I'm very encouraged that this bill has finally come to the floor of the United States Senate. I also would like to remind my colleagues that the Senate Appropriations Committee has put forward 12 appropriations bills that reflect the priorities of the American people and the budget we passed back in April. Let me remind my colleagues that that budget took $7 trillion out of the President's proposed budget over the next 10 years. And yet here we are today in October, facing the reality that since April we have not been able to debate on this floor those 12 appropriations bills. You've heard all year that we need to get back to regular order, and that means the Senate needs to bring up and debate each of these 12 bills individually. However, due to Democratic obstructionism, the federal government is operating under a short-term funding measure, and the Senate has not been able to debate any of these 12 funding bills. Mr. President, it's time for the political posturing to stop. People back home don't understand. I don't either. Senate Democrats are again acting as a roadblock in preventing progress. The American people sent us up here to govern responsibly, and it's time for Senate Democrats to start living up to this expectation, particularly when it comes to funding our government. In this vote today, Senate Democrats are blocking us from moving forward with a bill to fund military construction projects that help our troops and support key veterans programs, many of which need reform after being plagued by backlogs and scandals for years. We must make good our nation's promise to our veterans and provide our troops with the facilities they need to work, train, and fulfill the mission of the United States Armed Forces. Senate Democrats just voted against improvements to the VA electronic health record system so that veterans' records are safely and seamlessly accessed among agencies and the private sector. They just voted against increased transparency for the VA disability claims system to reduce the backlog for those veterans who need help the most. They just voted against much-needed oversight of VA construction projects like the Veterans Hospital, VA Hospital in Denver, Colorado, that is over $1 billion over budget. Additionally, they just voted against construction of the second missile defense site in Poland, a project that is an important deterrent against Russian aggression in Eastern Europe and had been previously scrapped by President Obama. Our nation is currently dealing with a global security crisis, Mr. President. We must make recent Russian aggressions and take rise of a great power traditional rivals very seriously. Just yesterday, Russia launched airstrikes in Syria to prop up President Bashar al-Assad in a strategy our own Defense Secretary, Secretary Ash Carter, described as counterproductive and equated to, and I quote, pouring gasoline on the fire. Clearly, we must make sure our troops have the resources they need to protect our country. Because of that, I'm shocked that my colleagues across the aisle today just voted to delay construction for our military facilities. Facilities our troops depend on to train for current conflicts and to prepare for whatever the future holds. Mr. President, most appalling of all, Senate Democrats voted today to block this bill even after we've learned that many of our veterans, thousands, tens of thousands of our veterans, have died while waiting for care they need and deserve. This is unconscionable, and the brinksmanship we're seeing from Senate Democrats across the aisle is totally unacceptable. Our veterans sacrifice so much for our freedom, and our servicemen and women are currently putting their lives in jeopardy every day for us and our families. We cannot fail them. This bipartisan funding bill does a lot of important things for our nation, Mr. President, but most importantly, it supports our American heroes. Like most of my colleagues, I've traveled this year and met with our fighting women and men on the front lines. Mr. President, the best, the very best of America is in uniform today, and they deserve our full support. Today, I call on my colleagues across the aisle to stop blocking these important bills. Let's get them on the floor and negotiate, compromise if we have to, but get to a conclusion where we can fund the men and women defending our freedom. We now have 72 days to return to regular order and debate these important appropriations bills so the priorities of our veterans, our military, and the American people can once and for all be restored. I sincerely hope that all colleagues in this body will not disappoint the American people yet again. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time, and I notice the absence of a quorum.